Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. Mrs. Donaldson, would you call the roll, please?
Deacon.
Here.
Fitzwater.
Present.
Hensley.
Present.
Kimna.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Schreiber.
Present.
Spencer. Spicer. Ward. Here. Wiseman.
Thank you very much.
Present.
Oh.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Next on the agenda is committee discussion of budget. I know Councilman Lester, you sent some thoughts to the group yesterday. Would you like to lead off with those?
Sure.
Okay.
Before I lead off with those, before I forget it, I'd like to place some items back onto the parking lot. I know before next meeting we'll have to vote on that, but I wanted to place back on there the one large truck in central maintenance and the mayor's original request back on the from G, and also the two street vehicles from Public Works.
Okay.
Back on.
Mrs. Perry, did you have a comment?
I'm good.
Okay.
And also put back on the sergeant to monitor and oversee the body and car cams out of safety tax. And one other thing, I'd like to go ahead and put on the ARPA list the two laptops that HR requested, $3,500. I really think staff need to have the tools that they need to work efficiently.
Okay. Let's
And-
give.
Okay.
Where were those two laptops from?
It was HR.
Correct, but which fund?
I believe you said ARPA.
It's ARPA.
ARPA?
Yeah. So one of the things that I shared was
Councilman Lester, one second. Are we straight?
Yes.
We're good? Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, one of the things I shared and I thought we should review was the different funds that we're talking about that make up the budget and the projected revenue from those, and a little bit about reserve and just talking about reserve somewhat. Each of those funds pulls from the same source of sales taxes. If we knew precisely what it would be, I mean, they are projections, but if we knew what they were precisely, they would all correspond. But of course they don't, and they are projections from different entities. But you know, the general 1%, it's at 13,500,000. So then you would expect half of that, you know, to be 6,750,000, and then a quarter of that to be 3,375,000. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. I do, and then some of them have reserves, and my take on reserve funding or balanced funds, those are in case your projections are wrong, you have economic downturn, or you have inflation that goes wild and your costs are much more.
Or some extraordinary event.
Some extraordinary event,
Yeah.
yeah. Disasters maybe. And so, and then what levels those are, you know, that's both the projections and the reserve fund, as I understand, those are up to us as far as what rules. And I guess I also think if, for example, like G and the infrastructure in the past, which really didn't have reserve, I guess I understand being more conservative and because you don't have a reserve. Of course, then you'll have the situation like we have at the end of the period, maybe a whole lot of money left over. And then because of that, we do have the opportunity to create a reserve for H, which I think is a good idea. But again, it's, to me, that reserve maybe doesn't have to be as robust as your ones for operating, because they are projects that you can delay a little bit, or maybe some not even do. But anyway, so I just thought we should talk about that. I do think, with respect to that we should seriously think about safety tax. That one at $2,800,000 is probably a couple $100,000 less than what it should be.
Yeah,
I think we should budget as realistically as we can. And with safety, I understand the actual reserve for safety is actually still the same reserve as we have for the general, which to me is fine. So anyway, that's one comment I would make.
If I could respond to that
Yeah.
briefly. Yeah, you know, if we were budgeting public safety tax, for instance, in line with the 1% general sales
Sure,
tax,
it'd be
it would have
a lot more.
$575,000
It would.
more projected towards it,
Right. And that's really important.
which is an important chunk of money in that fund, particularly in its first full year.
Right. You know, I agree. So I don't know if we want to talk about that now, or,
Feel free
Or
to
not.
proceed, then we can come back to all of it.
well, and then by the same token, I think H, when we're projecting for that we ought to project more realistically and probably at this, and we can adjust these, you know, in different years. I mean, the first year, what we're looking at, I think, rather than $5,600,000, we probably ought to project like $6 million. It's still conservative, but anyway, those are for my first comments.
Great. I agree and share the same thoughts as you do about aligning the general sales tax, the capital improvement sales tax, and the public safety tax, that's a practice that we should really consider for a number of reasons, and also that budgeting based on actuals and current trends and how those things
Yeah.
fit together is something I'm in favor of. Are there other comments from the committee on this discussion so far? Councilman Fitzwater.
I agree with those comments, and you know, I think that makes sense. I mean, we always have the opportunity. One, I think we're pretty careful when we spend dollars if it looks like we've over budgeted, especially in sales tax H. I think as those projects roll out, we're not going to spend the dollars till we know we have them there. Public safety, I think the same way. I mean, I think our department does a great job monthly and giving the finance committee good projections on where we are. So I think it makes sense to budget it what we anticipate, and if we need to recalibrate during the year or next year, we can do that. But it also gives us a little flexibility on projects that are needed in our community that we can fund if we feel comfortable and have assurances the dollars are there, that we don't hold back on things. And again, I think that's a conservative approach. I mean, we're not spending dollars that we never anticipate in the future, but we're also investing dollars that the taxpayers have trusted to us to complete, and we always have more needs than we have the ability to fund. So I think it's a very good proposal.
Yeah, you know, we've seen over the last few years, and we're seeing it pretty dramatically this year during this process, how it can be to try to set a budget based on these projections that may be more restrictive than they absolutely need to be. So the time is I think probably right to at least attempted at a recalibrated approach.
And so
Councilman Lester?
at this point, I just welcome any feedback, concerns from staff about such a approach.
I don't have any concerns. I think that's prudent, yeah. The prior council had a little different approach way back when, but no, I think it's certainly appropriate.
And I don't necessarily have any concerns, but I do think that we will need to watch it very closely as each of the new ones kick in. So for example, on public safety and also on the capital improvement H, those funds have started to be spent. We just started getting receipts on those in June. So if there has been much spending in those, it will be in advance of us actually having received the full amount of anticipated revenue for the year. That's really my only concern.
I think
It
part
is
of the
cash flow.
I think part of the conversation also that if we're going to adjust in that way, which I hope we do, going into the new fiscal year, I wonder, and I can already predict the look I'm going to get from Mrs. Perry, if there's a chance for us to look one more time at our projections for the general sales tax, and ensure that we are not being more restrictive than we need to be in coming to a reasonable number based on actuals and trends as close as we can, even though that may be greater than we've or slightly more than how we've done it in the past.
So currently in the budget that you have before you, the general fund sales tax, as we've said multiple times, is not as conservative. It is considerably higher, but it is a realistic number. We did just get in sales tax figures for the month of August, receipts, and those were slightly above projections. So I feel like the number that you have in your budget, based on the trends that we've been seeing and the projections for the state as well, are very realistic numbers, not as conservative as they have been in the past.
Okay. Other comments, Councilman Spencer?
I agree, and I think Councilman Fitzwater's kind of been bringing us to this point with continually asking about those projections and revenue figures. But, and I agree with Councilman Lester's approach as well. Sometimes it just takes us a little while to everybody get at the same place of comfort. I do reserve a little caution with lowering the general fund reserve balance number. And, you know, I think it would be wise for us to keep that at the minimum of 17%. I think I've said it a couple times. I'd like to see it even higher, but maybe that'll be an avenue for us to get there too with these more realistic approach. Or when I say more realistic, I mean just these adjusted revenues. And as I talked with Chairman Hensley earlier, that I think having that consistent methodology, you know, approach for all sales taxes, I think will is just a better way to do business, if you will. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the conversation so far? Councilman Lester?
So do you want to move that to a vote?
Mrs. Perry?
If it would be at the pleasure of the council, we can calculate what the public safety tax and the capital improvement tax H would be based on the same methodology that we have used for the general fund, and we could add it to the parking lot for the next meeting, just so the numbers are consistently done, if that would be the preference.
Yeah, so perhaps we should even save the motion until then, if that's all right. Great,
I guess,
conversation.
The only other comment I would have about it is with respect to the infrastructure sales tax and having some part of G held as a reserve, which I think is a good idea.
H?
Or, well, some part of G held as reserve for H. I mean, that's kind of what we're
Oh, I see what you
doing.
mean.
That when we then spend the funds, that they get spent out of G first, of course. But that we try to maintain a reserve.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if you were saying a sort of a policy or approach going forward as we move into the new series, but.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Well, if you have a specific proposal that you'd like to make, I'm sure we can bring that together as part of the package of discussion for Monday. Great, thank you. Any other comments on this particular point before we move on? Seeing none? Councilman Lester?
Okay. I sent, kind of tried to group, part of Chairman Hensley's proposal was to reduce the amounts as budgeted, and a good many of those, in my opinion, were things that there's a very good likelihood that, yes, we could do that, but later on we would need to replenish those funds. And I'm talking about like gas and I gave that one chart I gave. It includes gas and vehicle equipment parts and advertising, chemicals, and repairs for stoplights and streetlights.
Could I ask a question? Are you
Counselor.
working off the spreadsheet that you sent?
Yes.
Which tab are you working off of?
Let's see what I have.
Is it MLB mod or A mod? You talking about those items?
No, it's actually the possibly
Oh,
deferred.
possibly deferred. Okay.
Right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I've just grouped a number of those, but and what we'll need to get into, I guess, the individual ones to go into the detail. I guess you could go to the police one, the one that's marked police, and so the police gas currently, so in the budget it was $218,700, and then proposed reduction was down to $183,700, and that was equivalent to, I think, a 33% reduction from what was proposed. Looking at, when I looked at gas, I looked at, well, what's the gas prices now in Jefferson City and what were they a year ago, and they're like 21% higher. So I just use that, and so then that amount would be instead close to $200,000. If you look at what's budgeted in 22, the $164,000. I know in your budget page it says that's currently what it still is, but in checking with police, they've already overexpended that by well over $13,000. It's now sitting at $177,000 something, and on that trend, they would hit around $200,000 by the end of this budget year. So basically, I guess what I was proposing is basically the same, kind of the same amount as what we're experiencing this year as far as next year. But in each of the gas ones, you'll see that my recommendation is a little bit less than, although it has some reduction from what was proposed in the original budget. My point for all of these, that I'm recommending closer to what I would view as realistic is that, I mean, we can reduce these, and then later on, whatever time is that it's short, replenish them from balance. But to me, that's not what you use balance for. Or you shouldn't try to set up situations where you're going to obligate yourself to dip into your reserve fund, and I kind of see that's what we would be doing with some of these. So anyway, that's we can, if you want to, we can discuss that, or just move on to some of the detail.
I do have a question about fuel that our departments use. I don't think it's just police at the fuel or vehicle depot. The amount, and I truly don't know the answer to this, the amount per gallon that the city pays for that fuel that's used, which I understand might be slightly different than conventional gas that we'd be able to put in our vehicles at a gas station. Do we pay roughly a conventional fuel rate for that, or how much is that? Do we happen to know what that might be relative to standard gas?
To a standard pricing.
Yeah.
Off the cuff, I do not know that. I can provide that answer, but I do want to say that anytime there is fuel that's requested, it goes through a bid process. Essentially, we get quotes from the individual carriers in town, and it is best pricing at that point. But it is different than what you would get if you filled up your vehicle, and I can send that information on some of our more recent purchases.
Thanks.
Yeah, my only assumption was that yes, I knew the pricing would be different, but my assumption was that the inflation factor would be similar from, even though it's still bid and contracted. But
There have been increases, as there have been across the board, and Director Marash might be able to provide more detail on that.
And I think one of the big differences is fuel tax.
Correct.
So you can probably speak better to the fuel tax itself, but how we go about that.
Those have all been taken into account, though, when we've done this. There are some fuel
I mean,
tax.
comparing to the price that he would pay at the pump, it's much less.
It's much less on the
Yeah.
fuel tax.
If I could also just mention, when Britt does a very good job, he goes through, he doesn't just take a guess, he gets different resources to estimate the price of gasoline almost a year in advance. And of course, the year that we're in, we didn't know there was going to be a inflation to the degree that we're seeing now. So there is some basis to that estimate.
And then we always also, because we bid it every time we need a refuel, we keep very good track of the usage per department. Everybody keys in their code as they go fuel. It's all electronic. And so it's charged to the various departments. Like Public Works, though, in general fund, Public Works is all charged in one place. But police would have a budget, they all have their budgets, and it's very exact to them. So, it's very easy to track. And then we also know when we're getting ready to run out very quickly, too. So.
And I do believe that this year, we held off on having Britt make those projections because there was a
Same
certain point in time when he realized that he would have more updated numbers. And so we did hold off to the last minute on that in trying to make these projections, and those used the most recent numbers that he had at the time.
Thank you. Yeah, so just on this particular example, police gas for the last 3 years has been 163,865, 126, 888, 146, 12. And if this year we tap out at somewhere around $200,000, I mean, this has been a particularly volatile year for fuel prices. We all know that. My proposal at 183, I felt was in the neighborhood. And there were a number of these, I think there were 40-some lines that we considered at our either our last meeting or the meeting before that. I don't like to have to. I didn't like to have to propose any of those cuts, but we're you know, again, trying to accommodate a significant increase in our personnel services categories across the board with essentially increased revenue that to this point in our proposed budget just can't keep up with that. So we are having, you know, if we want to be able to pay for the things that we think are essential, this exercise here was simply trying to get us close enough with a whole lot of them that if we need a little bit more at the end of the year, it would not be a huge burden, ideally. But yeah, it's you know, what we passed last time was I think our best effort at trying to move a bunch of really important balls down the field, and we still didn't accomplish everything that we wanted to. But Councilman Fitzwater and then Spencer.
Well, I was just going to ask, as we improve our fleet, I would assume we're buying more fuel-efficient vehicles. Does that factor into the numbers also?
Who can answer that?
I cannot.
Well, when you say improve our fleet,
Our police, the new police cars we're purchasing, I assume have better gas mileage.
probably slightly, but not to a great extent. I mean, there's so many factors involved in fuel. It's kind of a voodoo math almost. You know, we look at various websites and put all those together and try to make a decision. So, but we don't account for the better mileage part.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Councilman Spencer, did you have something?
Just for clarification, Ms. Marash, you said that when they fill up, so as far as the tanks at our central maintenance facility, so do you guys bid each fill up? So,
Yes.
yeah, that's why I figured, okay.
They
So
contact
it's not on a
purchasing.
yearly contract,
No,
it's,
they contact purchasing each time there's a fill-up, whether that is at Central Maintenance or Hyde Park.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns on the conversation so far? Councilman Lester?
Okay, so, as you saw from, and I'm going, I guess on, well, I did do a graph of, on vehicle parts too, just to show the change, there, and again, it's vehicle parts, yeah, some of these things I just don't think, it's looking at past budgets and how much we spent, it's just, I think in this inflationary period, you can expect that what's been projected for the budget is probably pretty accurate, and that cutting that would just mean we're going to have to dip in the reserve later on. That's just how I look at it. So anyway.
I do not disagree with you as to likely need in the future.
So anyway, so if you're ready, we can move on to the detail, and under the tab is MLB mod, which basically I'm just looking at each of the areas where suggested cuts are made and just trying to review it in terms of just my own thoughts and looking at trends in the past budget and thinking about this being an inflationary period, which is probably, hopefully it'll subside some, but probably not for a little while, at least not back to where we were. So you proposed reducing the amounts that for elected officials, and you know, we could do that. We up here, I think, are all fortunate that we don't need that money, any of it probably, but it's a token amount, and you know, it's somebody may get elected that doesn't need some of that, I don't know. And, you know, I've said that, you know, if I actually cost it out, which I haven't, but I would expect, it's like $15 a day, $14.80, I think. So if I cost it out, you know, maybe it's $5 or $10 per hour, but, and after the recent experience, it's probably a couple of dollars an hour, so, but,
Yeah, I think if I attempted to do that first, I'd get very sad, and then I'd realize that I'm probably making what I was making hourly, waiting tables in the mid-90s, so.
so, anyway, I'll just leave that. The police and gas, we've kind of gone over, like I said, the requested above the 22 was 33% over what was budgeted for 22. Your proposal was 12% over that of last, or our current year we're operating in, and mine's 21% above. And like I said, we're on trend for at least police to hit around 200,000 for this year. The fire, the gas, the same type of thing, except interestingly, the fuel for fire, the projection from the current was a good bit less than for police or admin, and I don't know if that's because of different fuel used or what, but anyway, your proposal had been 2% less than what the current, and mine is 15% above, although what was requested was 23, almost 24% above the current year. Lines where I basically agreed with you. I don't have any comments. So gas administration, you can look at that. Your proposal was 15% below what our current budget year is, and mine was 15% above, although the request was 30% above current. And admin, planning and protective services, I was thinking we should have the same as requested. The amount requested was the same as the current 22 budget, and with all the stuff going on with East Capitol properties and demolitions and abatement and MSP, to me, I would think we might need similar professional services this next year. Dues and publications, and that's in the building regs. And with that area, you know, we've just adopted updated building codes for all our building codes. And for both this one, dues and publications, and I think the next one, for training, education, and building regulations, I just think it's important that we fund those because we've adopted these new regs, and the publications and the training that our staff needs related to those new regs, I think is really important. That we should probably keep what's been requested, because we need to have our staff knowing what they're doing with this. So the next one where I have some comments with small tools, the request is the same as the current 22 budget, and I just, you know, believe for any of the tools or equipment they're necessary for our staff to do their work. We just need to fund it. And certainly with the inflation we're having, I would not expect that that amount to spend need to decline. So anyway, I would suggest we fully fund that. It's at the same level as current 22. So unless, well, anyway. Operational supplies is same thing. Those, as I understand it, are necessary supplies they need for the operation in central maintenance. So again, with inflation, I would say, well, we need to fund those. We talked a little bit about the in central maintenance, the equipment and parts. We have equipment and parts. The request is 4.2% above the 22 amount. You had suggested reducing almost 5% below the current funding, and again with inflation, I think what little has been requested above current is certainly probably justified. Engineering dues and publication, I think it's important there. Our engineers are current and have the latest knowledge in the field, and so I would suggest we fund that. The request is the same as the current 22 budget year. Training and education, the request is 25% less, $1,000 less than the current year budget, and you've suggested we reduce that an additional 33%. But to me, with so much that we have going on with infrastructure and development projects, I just think our engineers need to keep up to date and have whatever training and education they need to keep up to date. Advertising, again, the advertising that we do for streets, I think, is just necessary what they have to do. It's not a whole lot of money there, but it's the current amount. It's the same in 23 requested as in 22, so I don't see that a decrease would be justified there. Chemicals. The request is the same as the current 22 budget, and you identified or suggested a 3.4% below the current, which would be that much below the current. And again, with inflation, I think certainly keeping it at the current, unless we've got a lot of chemicals left over from the current year, that we should fully fund that. Professional services, the request in streets is 14% over the current budget. I think that's related to maybe the new contract or things we have to better evaluate the condition of our streets. Matt, what is that? I mean, that's kind of what I
believe
was
that's
thinking.
mostly our weather service that we utilize. And I'm looking at Sheila. I don't know if you have it pulled up. I can't remember the exact line. I think, what's that?
I don't have that pulled up. I'm not sure
A
what we had in
big
the
chunk of that
professional
is the
services.
weather service. We split that with Cole County. And the street evaluation, I believe, is out of a different item, actually.
Okay, so the 14% increase in that, do you know
I'm sure our contract with the weather service went up.
was what it was?
It's a contracted
Yeah,
service.
okay, so, and, yeah, so that we couldn't reduce unless we eliminate the contract, I guess, which would, anyway. The repairs and stoplight, street lights, that request is 14% above current budget, and but it's 20% below the director's requested amount for street lights. You suggested 25% below the requested, and that would be 14% below the current budget. Again, with inflation and I mean, if we have those needs for the repairs for those, we're going to make them. It just seems justified that those be fully funded. So that's. I mean, if you made those differences, yeah, it does make a huge difference in how much reduction in those overall that amounts to. I mean, if you do completely all the reductions that were suggested, that'd be over $165,000, whereas with what I'm saying is like 35,360. So I mean, it's a big difference, but I just don't think in the environment we're in that those reductions really are appropriate. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I wish I didn't need to propose them, but I think also with the environment that we're in, the alternative in terms of what else we would not be able to fund at all for the city is, at least in my mind, equally unacceptable. Councilman Fitzwater?
Yeah, I just had a clarification question. When you come up with these numbers, and maybe both of, did you compare it just against last year's budget, or did you compare against actuals for this year to come up with anticipated projections? And I realize we're only 9 or 10 months into this year.
Right, I would have preferred to have actuals. I didn't, except for the police gas, which I asked about. I don't have actuals. I think for future budget discussions, that would be something that would be good for us to have as actuals on at least major items. But I just, in my analysis, I looked at the past years and the current, and what was proposed, and by director and the different.
Past year's actual or past year proposed budget?
I looked at that past year's actuals, what we have, and then our current year, which is not. We don't have the actuals, but.
We have year to date though, don't we?
Not in our packet here, except for, well, I guess for some things, maybe if it's been adjusted, those are our actuals. But then it can't be for everything, because like I said, the police gas was not up to date, so.
Those would not be actuals, those would be the current budget figures.
Okay.
The problem with providing actuals in your book is the fact that we would have to run this report multiple times each time we make a presentation. I started this process in April, so the actuals in April would probably not be valid at
So
this
I
point.
guess I would say the actuals at the first time you do the book, but.
And to answer your question, I looked across all of these lines also. I can't say that I was able to anchor it to not go below a certain amount or to be an average or a median of any of the numbers. I attempted to get a sense of what we've actually spent in the last several years, and then in each case attempt to arrive at a figure that didn't cut too much muscle, essentially. And I tried not to hit bone in too many places. So, yeah, that was my approach as well. Councilman Spencer.
Just a couple points. For procedure, as far as lowering council and mayor's pay, I fully support that this body should have the liberty and ability to do that. But my concern is that if there is ever an increase or even an ability to go back to these amounts, I don't feel comfortable giving myself a pay increase, which depends on how you define a pay increase. So what would that process look like? That would be, not self-serving.
So, if there is a decrease, then there would need to be a corresponding code change. So, salaries of elected officials are set in the city code. And so if this is what the city council wants to do, in addition to the budget, we would need to change the city code.
Do those get adjusted periodically at all?
No.
Or- I didn't think so. I think
No, they
this
sure
has been
don't.
the same rate for
Uh,
a long time.
A long time. Now, state law requires whenever there is an increase in elected official pay, that those pay increases do not go into effect until the next term. So there's essentially, there should never be a guarantee that the person voting for the pay increase will actually receive the pay increase. So there's some lag time between the approval of the pay increase and when it actually goes into effect.
Could we change that ordinance to where it would be tied into an election of the people? Or like in a municipal election to where
No,
that's
that's
done by the vote of the people instead of?
No, so
Okay.
that's that would likely be an unauthorized delegation of legislative authority. Essentially, decisions that are supposed to be the city council cannot be sloughed off to the citizenry, and so I don't think that would be consistent with Missouri law. You have to make the hard decisions.
You would think that the people would want that responsibility. If they think we're doing a good enough job, they should have a voice in that. But I defer to your expertise for sure. Thank you. Oh, and then the follow up on it's more of a procedural question too, and maybe suggestion in council meetings, maybe once a month. Not all of us sit on the financial committee, but maybe we have a time in the agenda that we get a brief financial report each time in one of those meetings. Like the sale, you're very quick about giving those in the meetings I attend about the sales tax revenue packet. So it just might put more of a highlight of it and getting that information out to the public as well, which I think would be a good thing. So, just a suggestion.
So that finance committee packet, each report that's inside of it is posted on the website every month, usually about the same time, accessible to the public. But if that's council's prerogative, then I'm sure that we could make an adjustment to
I don't
one
think
of
we're
the agendas.
talking an extra 45 minutes or so. I think we could probably
Absolutely
get
not.
done in a lot less time. So, I just think it's just maybe a good practice to look into. So, thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Any other comments, questions from other members? Councilman Lester, Councilman Deacon.
My question, not on the cuts, but how do we increase revenue? And the dirty word is a use tax on the internet. Where does that start? Who starts it? We have to the discussion has to be had. I mean, my wife was ordering from the internet back in the early 90s, and I was telling Cliff Olson when he was on here, I said, my gosh, you guys are losing money. I mean, over the catalog. Now the internet, and it's been just tripled with COVID. Columbia's able to pass it. We didn't pass it because there's a Christmas tree of stuff on it that lasts, what was it? I don't know, some kind of redemption thing. I don't remember that, Mark? Yeah, it didn't work. There was 100 different things they're gonna put on there. Even motorized bicycles that would fly, I think. They were promising it. But just a straight use tax, and if it was presented as a fair share, not as a tax, it's critical, because we don't have a population to support a growing retail. We don't have a lot of businesses coming in where we get taxes off of them. Columbia's unique where they have 25,000 new pocketbooks every year. Plus they're giving a crease on that, so we have to do something. I think we did lay the level of playing field with the use tax, but it has to be presented as a fair share tax, and don't let the people say, oh, poor tax, we can't do that, it's gonna hurt people. Just as my observation in the last really critical observation of the city the last 50 years since my early 20s, and we're not growing, and we're not going to. I don't see it happen unless magically a chip manufacturers came here and we imported a lot of high-tech people, or if, oh, heaven help us, if we would have partnered with St. Mary's Hospital, with the university, would have had ancillary startups with healthcare, but I don't see worse. We don't have a manufacturing model anymore, so we have to find a way to generate revenue. And the use tax is the most fair way. Presenting it to the public that is palatable is, it's way over my head. Maybe the chamber could do it correctly, but I think they were part of the bombed one. I remember, who was on that? Gary Wilbers. He said he didn't do a very good job with it, so.
Because you don't pay a sales tax and a use tax on the same transaction. If you pay one, you don't pay the other. Councilman Wiseman.
I'd like to nominate Councilman Deacon to run the next use tax campaign.
I think that might be beyond the scope of this committee. I'm gonna help my colleague Councilman Deacon out here at the moment.
Yeah, but it would be fun.
That's the most logical way to generate revenue.
Thank you.
A fair share, because the other merchants, they're collecting.
I think we have a second to my motion.
The chair is declining to recognize the motion at this time. Thank you. But as to process, generally,
Yeah, it is a tax that is authorized for cities to put on the ballot. So it's very simply an ordinance that places the issue on a ballot. There have been some recent changes in state law that more explicitly authorize cities to collect use tax. It's using the buzzword, the Wayfair tax, which recognizes some changes in federal Commerce Clause law. But the process is simple: is just the city council approves an ordinance to put it on the ballot. The hard work is the campaign to try to get it passed, and cities cannot spend money on advocacy campaigns. We can educate voters, we can provide educational materials to voters, but we cannot advocate. And so generally what these campaigns rely on are private groups to provide the advocacy portion of that. And so it's the city does not pick and dictate who those are. You have to find volunteers who want to spend time and energy on those campaigns. And so that's really the hard part. And for better or worse, that's kind of outside the city's control. But the part of the recent changes in Missouri law clarified some of the ballot language that is to be used when doing a use tax. The required ballot language used to be pretty confusing, and so there was an attempt to clean up that language that has to appear on a ballot. And as part of this process of implementing the Wayfair tax, the Municipal League has increased the amount of resources that it's made to cities to help in efforts to do that. So it's a move that is being carried out throughout the state, is for cities to pass these use taxes. And I would not be surprised with every single election cycle, whether it be November, August, or November, or April, August, or November, that's available to municipalities, that at least a few cities in the state are doing a use tax. And it's been that way for a couple of years, and I expect it's going to be that way for a few more years. So
thank you. Councilman Kemna and then Councilman Spencer.
Yeah, just recollect, I know I was on the council when we had the use tax on the ballot. How many years ago was that, do we know? Was it like 3 years ago?
Yeah,
So it
I want to say it was 19. It was either 18 or 19.
Yeah, and I know there had been municipalities around the area that have passed it. I think the chamber was the main driving force in trying to market it. So it's like, I'd be in favor of going that direction and putting it back on the ballot again. It's just we would have to have, you know, some discussions on how we're going to market this, and, you know, is 3 years, is that long enough for people to say, hey, maybe we made a mistake and we need this now, and, you know, move forward? I mean, I don't know. It's hard to gauge what voters think, but
Does the county have a use tax?
yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
That's right. They do, right? Yeah, okay. Councilman Spencer.
And it was part of my method of my madness of having the initial discussions of property tax reduction. It was kind of a step towards something like that, to show the public that we're serious about lowering property taxes, and then trying to offset that with a use tax. And then, so what my formula would be is that we try to pass a use tax and give a property tax reduction. So I guess, but I would like to have some figures sometime in the future, if we want to talk about it, what the anticipated revenues would be on a use tax, and then how we could proportion that of a property tax reduction. So, and next year, with that being an assessment year, I think would be a good time to maybe try to accommodate that. And what I would envision it's somewhat a little bit complex, but I would have that in a tiered reduction phase every odd year. So that really is not now the time to discuss that. I just would like to throw that out there and echo with what Councilman Deacon and Councilman McKenna has stated. So thank you.
Thank you both for your comments. Councilman Lester?
Yeah, I think, since we tried that before the use tax, we have had, the COVID pandemic, and, many more people have bought things online, and so maybe, and the Wayfair, legislation went through, so it might be a better chance if we do it again, so.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on that point? Councilman Lester, did you have additional comments you were wishing to make?
So there's also the tab ML mod A, which is a same type of thing that parallels your A tab, and just similar comments of places I agree in, places that I do disagree, so I can go through that. So, the attorney office supplies, okay, so that request for 23 is the same as 22, and less than half of what was actually needed for supplies in I guess in 21. I say in the current year, but I guess in 21, for some reason, there were a lot of office supplies in that year. The dues and publications, the request is $1,200, or 11% less than the 22 budget. So, you know, I believe it's important that our legal counsel stay current and have the latest legal knowledge. So, I think that should be funded fully. Professional services, the request is the same as 22, and 40% less than the actual cost in 21. So I think the costs in the 23 is probably, we shouldn't expect that there'll be less. court office supplies. And if anybody wants to question anything, just stop me. Office supplies, the request is 1,500, 38% less than the current 22 budget and the director requested amount. And I would think the cost for the needed supplies are not going to decrease in 23. So I think that should be fully funded. Yes.
Yeah, so on behalf of Judge Evans and the Court Administrator Sullivan, they did ask if the City Council would consider, they don't have a problem with the overall amount that's being pulled out of the court budget, but think that there's a lot more flexibility in their professional services budget line item. We're using our substitute judge a lot less often than we have in recent past. We finally hit some stability in that area and have requested that if there is going to be that reduction, that it just be pulled out of the professional services as opposed to the other line items, for whatever that's worth. But that was specifically highlighted to me.
Okay, so I certainly would defer to that.
So that would be 1,500, I guess, right? Sorry, not that you're looking at it right now. Out of the court, yeah, it looks like all I'm proposing was 750 from office supplies, 750 from
Yeah.
training and ed. So taking 1,500 out of professional services.
Correct.
Okay, I would make the motion right now that we make that change.
Yep.
Does
And
anyone need
you-
that repeated?
You don't need a second. You're just
Well, no.
not with
Well, last week we approved all of this. So I think in order to change it, we would need to. I mean, I guess yeah, I can put it out there, but I would also make the motion that we actually make the change, which I think should probably come with a second.
So yeah, I would support that. Yes.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on that particular point? No. Seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Deacon?
Yes.
Fitzwater?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Lester?
Aye.
Schreiber?
Aye.
Spencer?
Aye.
Spicer? Ward? Aye. Wiseman?
Aye.
Sounded like the ayes might take that one. Great. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Councilman Lester?
The next one in human resources, operational supplies. The request is the same as the 22 budget, and so anyway, I think the costs are needed. The supplies are needed and shouldn't be expected to be decreased, especially with inflation the way it's going. Training and education, that request is the same as the 22 budget, and that I think we want our staff to be trained, and so I wouldn't support reductions there. Postage for finance. The request is the same as the current 22 budget, and postage. I think those are all necessary mailings that are done, and so I certainly wouldn't expect a decline in the costs, and so I wouldn't. I think that should be fully funded for that postage for finance. Same with office supplies that expect are needed. The request is actually half of what the 22 budget was, and so I think certainly that they probably need all that amount for their office supplies. Operational supplies, the same thing. Well, the request was $200 less than the 21 actual, and and the director requested level and the current 22 budget level, so it's even less than what was requested. And so with inflationary pressures, I think the requested operational supplies is justified and should be funded. Dues and publication, the request is the same as the 2022 budget amount and only $100 more than 21 actual. With inflation, I think that's justified, and certainly wanted to keep our finance staff up to date. With publications, same thing with training and education. Actually, the request is almost $1,000 less than the current budget amount. But anyway, your request was for a reduction of 2,100, and I put in a reduction of 1,000. So anyway, those are the extent of differences between our two approaches.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned a moment ago, the changes that were in my presentation were adopted at a previous meeting. So that's what's currently in green right now. We have adjusted those two court items just a moment ago. But for the rest, were you wanting to make a motion as to I guess it would be your B mod and A mod, that those changes be adopted throughout, or? Or what sort of action were you looking for?
So, yes, I mean, I would make that motion to do that. I would, I don't know if we want to have some discussion about that, whether in the full, each of the things, or some of them, we've already dealt with the court one, but,
So you're making the motion?
yes, I would make that motion.
Okay. Well, for the sake of having discussion, I will second the motion, so we can have some discussion now. Councilman Fitzwater?
And I know it's not a requirement to put something on the parking lot or make modifications, but have you given thought to, it looks like there's about $150,000 in total difference between the two. How are you gonna fund that? Councilman
I think
Lester?
that's questions to you.
So, we start out with the proposed budget, and the recommendations from Councilman Hensley was to reduce quite a bit of that and fund other or add things to the budget. So my proposal is that a lot of those things we should actually fund. I guess you're asking me what then would I take out? And I guess I need to look at that because I don't know. I'm just saying that the things that have been proposed to take out, I don't think should be reduced. I think they're important. Some of them may be necessary. So.
Thank you.
I agree. I mean, you don't have to have that tonight, but at some point, we're gonna have to sort it out. It seems like there were only a couple of major additional expenditures that you proposed. So at some point, we're gonna have to balance.
So one thing I would propose, if one of the big items I know was the police analyst grant writer. I think if that's real important, that we have that is another thing, another position that could come out of the safety tax. Certainly would be appropriate, just like I think the sergeant that is necessary for tracking body cams is necessary, and should come out of safety tax.
Okay, Councilman Spencer?
I have a concern about that approach. I think the public safety tax should be, as far as for salaries, should be for what I would call sworn officers or dedicated line staff in the fire department, not what I would call administrative staff. Someone who's not, sworn or trained in the area of firefighting. I think we need to kind of keep it as clean as we can for what those dollars were really intended for. I don't think we want to try to absorb all the administrative positions, whether it be the very few in the fire department or the police department, because that's really going to hamper any advancement or potential growth in those departments.
So my understanding of the safety tax was for to fund any needed salary, benefits, equipment, even facilities that are needed for public safety. And I don't know as far as the public's understanding, or certainly my understanding, that there were restrictions on just certain areas of safety that would be funded through that.
I'm sorry, but that's not the understanding that I had at all.
So I had a conversation with Officer Bowman about this the other night, and actually he's going to send me the state statute, which basically when they did the presentations, that's what they presented as far as what could be funded, would be funded, types of things that would be funded through safety tax.
Well, sorry, this is an important conversation. I will simply say that it's not part of your motion, as far as I understood your motion. So maybe it's something that we can take up at a later point. I would just say, as a point of caution, I know that we're potentially proposing to do it for the CAMS sergeant, the position which I sort of see as an extension of the machines themselves. But I would be really careful about us getting into the practice of funding individual positions as a regular course of action out of that particular fund. But if it's all right with you all, can we put a pin in that particular chat and come back to it? Great. Other discussion on the motion? Councilman Spencer.
So are we going to be looking at the whole slate again?
I believe that's his motion.
Is that your motion? Or are you willing to parse and piece maybe if it fails? Or
You can certainly bring pieces back up if it happens to fail.
So yes, I think if it fails, I will review and maybe bring back some of it.
would you feel more comfortable waiting until we're only missing Councilman Spicer, so to where it would be a dual exercise, you offset your proposal with the cuts, and we vote on it next week, or I'm just it's your motion, it's whatever you're comfortable with doing, and it's whatever. I'm just was wondering.
If we were to
So yeah, I understand that if my motion, along with this, then there's adjustments needed on the expense side, the budget, so, or the funding side, so, yeah, I would be fine with, bringing that with it, I guess, and instead of making a motion today, make it next meeting.
Okay, so your plan is are you withdrawing your motion?
I'll withdraw my motion for now.
Okay. And you can bring it up next time, and we can do the whole slate if you want, and then you can go piece by piece, if you need to. Is that what you're planning to do?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much, for that. Councilwoman Ward.
I have a question. Comment first. I think your tab, the B tab, does have more items on there that, relate to public safety. So I kind of hesitate to lower them. The chemicals, I know when I served on Public Works, Britt would always have to come to us for additional funding because of the weather and our supply was getting low. Mr. Marash, do you know where we are at right now with our current supply going into the winter season?
Yeah, I believe we're fairly full,
Okay.
like our normal procedure. I think we're not quite full, but I'm drawing a blank for right now. I don't know why. But what we do then is put in like an average winter's cost and try to predict the cost, if you will. And this last year, our costs were up quite a bit, so we were hopeful that could moderate a little bit. So.
Right. Do you have any concerns with lowering the budget?
Well, again, what
amount
we always do, you never know about winter. There's been some winters we've had quite a surplus in the past, as of recent, not lately. But, so what we do is we go ahead and continue to order, and then, and this is a kind of a general comment Steve and I have talked about. We get to a point and we monitor these budgets, and there's usually some flexibility. We're taking a little flexibility out with all this discussion, I think, and I'll have to go to Steve and say, hey, we're running low here. Do we do a supplemental? And we'll have a conversation and decide what to do. I mean, I think that's kind of how we manage it. Just
Okay.
so just in general on all things, but especially on the salt is something we pay real close attention to.
Right. And regarding the street lights, I know there's always a budgeted amount there that we work with Ameren UE to replace broken lights or add lights.
Well,
and-
depending on which budget you're talking about on
Okay.
street lights.
It's the one,
The large
the
budget in
repairs
stoplight repairs, that's more signal repairs
and
and street lights.
street lights, so those would be residential lights?
No,
Or no?
generally speaking, that budget is for signals and city-owned lighting systems, such as the Acorn lights downtown or the lights on
Okay.
Edgewood down the median. Those are ours. St. Mary's
Okay.
going up to New Hospital is ours. Things like that. And so we would have to repair those periodically.
Okay.
I think we actually had a pink sheet in to change over the ones on Mission Drive to LED. They're getting some age on them, and we're starting to replace them, so we would change those over. So it wouldn't be a full change order. It's more or less something happens to one, we go fix it.
Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better, because I did have some, concern about lowering it if it was for
And-
the street lights in our neighborhoods, because I know I have requested additional lights on
Now,
some
additional
streets that-
lights, that's a little different.
Right, or repairing or putting in the LED so they're brighter.
Yeah, we do that, yeah.
because,
Our request
I
to
mean-
Ameren do it, and those are reflected in our rental cost per month, electricity and rental cost per month. They, I think one in Councilman Weissman's neighborhood recently, I think we did, through UE, so we contacted them, and we ended up getting a brighter LED light there because of the,
Well, and I know I've worked with Britt in the past to do that, because there are a lot of streets that, with safety concerns and crime issues. So I know at times we get close to that budget and, it's just not in there to add or.
yeah, and like I said, on all these budgets, certainly we'll do what we can and work through these budgets, but as we're monitoring them, we get close on something, I'll have a conversation with Steve, and we'll decide how we go about, if we shift work, or do we ask for a supplemental, or what do we do?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna note right now, we usually keep these meetings to no more than 90 minutes. And I know that everyone up here has an enormous appetite for another lengthy meeting this week. But I would ask at this time, if there's anyone here to provide public comment tonight, they're welcome to come up and share that. Anyone? Nope. Okay, just thought I'd put that out there. And if the committee wants to, we can go beyond 7, but I will, we'll note that we're about 10 minutes out from that. So, any other committee discussion this evening?
Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to point out a few things that we've modified on the parking lot to have discussion about since the last meeting.
Please.
So, okay, did it just die? Can you scroll to the top for me? Okay, so we previously at the meeting discussed the additional parks admin chargeback fee. I believe this would be the meeting that would drop off if we don't have any further discussion on it. There is an item here to remove a partial transfer from the public safety, and I'll get to what that pertains to down in the bottom for the expenses here in just a second. But we did talk at Tuesday's council meeting about the potential for additional interest income based on the banking services contract that was introduced on Tuesday night. So this is a change. It's an increase of an additional $70,000 in the interest income line for the general fund. I don't know if the committee would choose to vote on that tonight if there's any concern there, but that is a new one that we probably need to have a discussion about.
So just accepting the additional.
Correct, changing it from red to green to accept the additional interest income on that.
So moved. Okay. Do we need a roll call on that?
I can do it.
What's
The-
the, what's the,
Sheila, would you just give a
So,
brief
so
explanation?
it's the $70,000 additional interest income
Okay,
line.
we're voting on
When
that.
we built the budget, it was at a minimal
I just want a
interest rate.
clarification on what,
That's
exactly what we're voting on.
That's
Okay,
what we're
yeah.
voting on.
Okay, and to.
To
just-
increase the interest income revenue by $70,000 from what you currently have before you in the general fund.
Great, and it would flow, I guess, into.
General
just the-
fund?
Where in the.
General fund.
The general fund,
Um,
specific spot? Do we need
If
to
you
say?
choose not to allocate it for expenditures, it'll roll to the fund balance.
Okay, well, great, yeah, let's.
Or offset the other expenses that really we have not dealt with at this point. That's, and I do believe that there are some additional expenses here that probably are going to need discussion.
Yep. Okay, is the motion clear? Please call the roll.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Deacon.
Okay, we just made $70,000, everybody. Well done. What else, any other comments, discussion this evening?
We're not finished.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You'll scroll to the bottom. Okay, these are the two items that relate to the removal of the partial revenue from the public safety tax. These are two items that have previously been discussed. They were included in the mayor's budget to come out of the public safety tax. And I do believe that there was some council discussion about this on Tuesday for it to be removed from public safety tax and come out of the general fund. So a portion of that negative number at the top is a result of these items. Now, again, we just put $70,000 worth of additional revenue in there that could offset these. Since these have not been discussed at a previous budget meeting, I would be okay with them staying on until the next budget meeting, since that would be the rule of 2.
Plus, you're also going to look at updating some of the revenue numbers, the sales tax revenue that we spoke about earlier.
I would not intend to update that revenue in this particular
On
fund,
sales
in the
tax.
general fund.
Well, yeah, but it may have an impact on the public safety sales tax piece. I'd still do this. My point is that there's still some additional revenue numbers that are coming, not general fund, but related to those other funds.
Correct, but this is just the general
Yeah,
fund.
I know, but it may have an impact on, it could.
It could increase the revenues in the public safety,
revenue,
yes.
right.
So I'm
Great,
not
yeah,
sure
I'm-
how council
yeah,
would like
yeah.
to proceed.
Well, unless someone has, what is that, $250,000 they'd like to throw out there right now. Yeah, it's fine to stay on there for now.
Okay.
That's great. Okay,
These are the changes that were reflected with Councilman Lester's discussion today. I don't think there's anything on H, but, and on public safety, then this is kind of what I'm discussing. You see the removal of the Juneteenth holiday and the removal of health and dental. That's what we just put onto the general funds parking lot. Also, I asked Councilman Hensley, because his original changes that have since been voted on and put on the parking lot for the gleaning funds included $445,000 for the body cameras. The original budget presented out of public safety tax included $700,000 for body cameras, so we have removed the body camera $700,000 here. It is currently on the parking lot for the gleaning funds from sales tax G in the amount of $445,000.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions, Councilman Spencer?
Yes, the admin fee for parks, I'm fine with letting it roll off until we get some additional information that,
Yeah, we hadn't gotten to that point yet.
okay, so.
But,
I'll
no,
just-
I just mean we haven't had that conversation
Yeah,
yet tonight.
okay, so,
Yeah.
but I will plan to bring it back on, so.
Yeah.
If we're comfortable with leaving it on there, even though it's a formality.
Can always bring it back.
Bring it back, so,
Yeah.
but the plan is to bring it back.
I do think, and some other folks can say if they agree, but if we could ask for some sort of uniform model proposal for how we could potentially calculate admin chargebacks in a consistent way across the affected funds, I think the ideal would probably be based on what it costs to provide services, but at the very least, like some rational, reasonable metric for attempting to do it in a way that is uniform across, again, the affected funds.
And I do believe that that's what Councilman Spencer has presented as far as the number, the 27960, that would calculate the parks admin chargeback in the same manner that that all of the enterprise funds are calculated at. Again, parks is a special revenue fund, but we've got the 4 enterprise funds: airport, parking, transit, and wastewater. And also the workers' comp fund is calculated in the same manner. Those are the funds we charge the admin chargebacks to, and that's where his 270 comes from. I'm happy to provide that
Yeah,
to council in a
and
manner
my
that we
comment
can
was
look
just,
at.
was not just about parks. There's been, I think, probably still some confusion and certainly a lot of discussion about methodology also, and about the origin of these methods and whether they are, the best things to carry forward after all of this discussion. So if there's a way that we could look at an approach and in an intentional way that is tied to the thing that makes the most sense and is the most accessible.
And can someone provide information on what that approach might be?
Well, that's, I think, why we often have to rely on our excellent professional staff. I think we've had a lot of, we've
We
had
can
a
have
lot.
a more in-depth discussion about how it's calculated now. There are different ways to go about doing it, but
Yeah.
we could do that.
So-
maybe the next meeting or something.
Some proposals, suggestions, ideas would be appreciated. Any other comments or questions on that point? Councilman Fitzwater?
Well, I also, related to that, I believe there was a comment Tuesday night that there potentially is the ability to look at adjusting upward what we're charging for the administrative fees, which I assume would have a positive impact on the general fund. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So should that be part of the discussion? Should it be 2 separate discussions?
I think it could
We'll
be.
include it if that's okay.
Thank you. Councilman Spencer?
And I guess the other piece would be the loggers' contributions. If I think there were some of us that would like a better explanation.
Yeah, so I see that we're at 7 o'clock right
Yeah,
now.
I just didn't know if we wanted to try to.
And, yeah, it would be exceptionally helpful if at our next meeting, we could also get just a primer on loggers, especially as it relates to funding requirements for police and fire. And then any sort of public discussion we can have on the effects on our budget of that particular contribution. Excellent. Any closing comments from anyone here? No? Any public comment that was shy the first time? Seeing none. Great. We will see everyone 5:30 p.m. here on Monday evening. Thank you all so much. We're adjourned.